For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Matthew 13, verse 12. So, in our age of social media, of access to so much information in the life of so many people, what some will consider our ability to compare our whole life to people's snippets of glory days. It's important to ask ourselves, from what lens are we looking at our own life? Do we consider ourselves to be the one that's lacking, not possessing, or do we see ourselves as the one in abundance? Is it instinctual for us to look at what we don't possess, or do we focus on the things that we do have? Because when we're talking about the previous verse, it's not necessarily about what you have in a, how do we say, in a factual way, but really the perception of what you possess. It has a lot to do with perception. When you think about, you could say, money. For most of, if you look at your life, you might be, quote unquote, a bit more broke than other people who have mansions or palaces or things like that. But when you compare yourself to people who live in really poverty situations where they live maybe off of a few less than $100 per month or maybe year, or when you look at the whole timeline of history, then again you could say that you live in the richest time in this period, this last few thousand years of known history. Or you can even say that in another way. Oh, well, the price of housing, the cost of living is increasing inflation, so we're actually living in a more impoverished time than the last few generations that have been, because the price of it were less costly, there was less inflation, the money was more valuable in the past 50 years or so. So really, when we talk about the have and the have-nots, whether we're in lack and abundance, it can depend when you put yourself in the timeline, and even in this present timeline, where in the world. But truly, it's less about the quantity that you have, but the perception to how you perceive yourself to be. Because actually, this perception will lead to your resulting reality. And I want to explain that by talking about a certain study that has been made about a study on luck by Richard Wiseman, which is basically a study to see if there was truly some people that were born under a lucky star, that were just lucky as it is, and people that were born unlucky. That was a study, a 10-year scientific study on the nature of luck called the luck factor by Dr. Richard Wiseman. He was a professor of public understanding of psychology at the University of Hertfordshire. And he's the one who ran that study on the minds of lucky and unlucky people, basically asking himself, is there really people who are born lucky and people who are just born unlucky, fated to repeat this scenario all of their lives? In the luck factor experiment, basically what he had is a cohort of 400 different people, all men and women from all different walks of life. 400 people that the professor followed closely for a period of 10 years. And the important common divide amongst those people were this. Some considered themselves to be lucky and others unlucky. So in this popular experiment, he was able to determine whether or not some people were born under that lucky star or not, while others weren't. If that was true that some were born under that and some not. And his conclusion was that there actually was no such thing as someone who was naturally lucky, but instead there was 4 different factors that he singled out, that he realized that people who considered lucky actually used to generate that luck. Basically, luck is something that is generated through 4 different factors. The first one is they were skilled at creating and noticing chance opportunities. And the second factor was they had a positive expectations of the future that creating self-fulfilling prophecies. The third one, they had a good intuitive ability to make right decisions. And the fourth, they had the ability to deal with opposition, meaning when they were under bad luck situations, by reframing it in their mind. So let's go back on the first factor, which is being skilled at creating and noticing change opportunities. So you'll see that some of those factors actually have to do with how the mind function and how one perceives themselves in their mindset, which causes their mind to act in different ways. So let's exemplify it. They used a certain journal test. They put both unlucky and lucky people under a test where they gave them a journal. And they were supposed to count how many images there were in that journal in a certain amount of time. So the results were interesting. And on average, the lucky people only took a few seconds to find out how many images there were, to finish the test actually. And the unlucky people took an average 2 minutes. But the reason is special. It's not about their ability to count the images. It's something else. Because on the second page of the newspaper, there contained a message that was written really in big letters that took half of the page. And it said, stop counting. There are 43 photographs in this newspaper. That was the message. And the thing is, most of the unlucky people missed that message, that flagrant message, that flagrant opportunity. They completely missed it, and they kept counting. And most of the lucky people, on average, they actually found out that image. So what you see really is that the mind of somebody who perceives themselves as lucky and lucky function differently. The brain kind of has a confirmation bias that it will look and it cherry picks all of the ideas that will confirm the narrative that you have in your mind. It's almost like their own minds had shut themselves down from the ability to notice that opportunity. As long as you perceive yourself in a certain way, it seems like there are some things that you will not be able to pick up on. So that's it. First factor, being skilled at creating and noticing change opportunities. Second factor, it's basically just a positive expectation of the future, creating self-fulfilling prophecies. Kind of as a man thinking in his heart, so he is. So when you have an expectation of what the future looks like, which is lucky people tend to have more positive example of that. Positive expectation, visions. What it causes, it actually creates your mind the ability to start being able to notice the chances, the opportunities, and the things that can the doors that can actually allow you to. Scott. So they just have more positive expectations and self-fulfilling prophecies, and basically the lens of their mind causes them to actually have more ability to step into that reality than the people who have already limited themselves and shut themselves down. The third one being the intuitive ability to make right decisions. The thing is, it's interesting when you learn about the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind, once you give it a vision or a goal or an image of yourself, of who you want to be, it'll start feeding your conscious mind with the steps to necessary things to do so that you can actually actualize that person you want to become, that person, that narrative that you have about yourself. So the third one, again, this intuition comes from a different self-perception. And 4, it's the ability to deal with bad luck situation. So here's an example. If you have somebody who wins bronze versus somebody who wins a silver medal, most of the time, actually in the luck factor, Richard Wiseman used that example to exemplify how people who win bronze sometimes are more happy with themselves from people who win silver medal. Because the people who win bronze, it's like, okay, there were 2 steps there, at least they were in the podium. If there were 1 person less, they would have not been in the podium, right? But the person who wins silver is, if I had been a bit more, I would have won gold. So it's really just this reframing of the mind, this reframing of the situation that leads to either a more positive tune, more positive perception of what it is, the situation that you're in, or a more negative one. The one that says, I could have been much more if I did more. And the one who says, if I did a bit less, I could have not even been on the podium, right? So how you perceive what happened to you. For example, great achievers tend to see obstacles as opportunities, setbacks as a way to grow, but it doesn't mean that you're a failure. It's a different perception of failing or the things that happen to you. Perceiving things as a way to learn lessons instead of badgering yourself down and saying, I didn't do good enough, right? So this ability to change the perception of the situation that you're in allows you to actually step into those good fortune situation. So, as you see, in conclusion, again, there's no people who are born lucky or unlucky. It's really basically how people act through the lenses of who they perceive themselves to be, which allows their brains to function differently, their minds to function in a different way, which leads them to live out the outcome of their self-perception. So the thing is, you should focus on what you have versus what you don't have. There are some roads and some paths that will not open to you until you start becoming the new version of yourself, the new self that can actually step through this into this reality. And for those interested in meditation to learn how to change their self-image and to access more of their subconscious mind, you can have access to my library content on my Patreon down in the description below. You will not start perceiving opportunities until you start embodying the lucky persona, basically, or whatever persona you want to live out. And two, the subconscious will not give you intuitive steps to actualize that new self until you start embodying it. And there are basically things that you can actually practice on your own. For example, positive self-talk and noticing yourself expecting negative futures and slowly but surely changing the tune and not associating with those mindsets anymore, which may be uncomfortable at first if you have a habit of doing it, but by practice, you become better. And two, you can try to reframe the way you view opposition, bad situations, setbacks, or bad luck events, saying things like, oh, this was bad, that happened to me, but maybe this will help me grow XXX quality that the new version of myself will inquire. Understanding that I'm not the things that I've experienced, right? I'm more than that. Or saying things when you fail. It sucks, but it's okay. I failed. Now I have more experience and I will do differently in the future. I'm more experienced than the person who failed in the past, the one who didn't know. Or I'm one step closer to my goal instead of look at how I'm failure. I failed. I can't do this. I knew I shouldn't have started, right? Changing the framework. Or saying, wow, I used to not be the person who would even attempt to do something like that, but now I did it. Or saying things like, this is something that I do not want to see in my life anymore, adding different events that you keep seeing repeated, and say, okay, this is giving me clarity on what I do not want, so I can start embodying who I want to be. So that's true. If you want to experience something different in your life, you need to become someone different. You need to change the tune if you don't want to sing to the same song over and over again. That's again changing your frequency, changing your state of being, or simply saying changing the person you perceive yourself to be. You're more than what you experience, and things are not set in stone. Your brain is very neuroplastic. It has the ability to morph and change and learn whatever age you are. If things are not set in stone, you're not defined by what happened. You're not stuck to one simple destiny. Your past doesn't need to be your future. Your past doesn't need to be transplanted into your future. You get to choose. And this is where we start taking responsibility, asking ourselves, okay, what percentage of my life do I have authority with? What percentage is decided by luck? Something you can ask yourself. 10, 20, 30%, 60% of your life is decided by luck? Think good things happen to other people because of luck, and then you tell yourself, oh, I didn't succeed because this person they were born to a better family, this outside circumstances was better, so that's what's defining their success. So saying that this is why when they're the lucky ones, they had the better starting cards or stuff like that, right? But then you say, okay, but how much authority are you giving away? Which percentage are you saying I will never have authority over my life? Because once you start taking responsibility, now you start growing in authority, because you're saying, oh, the power is in my hand to change. I can choose to think differently, act differently, perceive differently, and now I have the will in my hand. I can choose to turn right, turn left. It's not the outside that determines the inside. It's the inside that determines the outside. And yeah, so we don't need to live in Groundhog Days anymore, basically. A change of lens can change your entire life, and you can choose if you want to be the have or the have not. But eventually, as you keep being the have, perceiving, you keep sowing those seeds into your heart, you'll see a harvest, because that's how the kingdom works. So, going through the 4-factor quick again, you'll start being skilled at creating and noticing opportunities, start having positive self-talk and self-fulfilling prophecies. You start noticing the intuitive ability to make the right decision, and grow into the ability to handle bad situations. So that's pretty much all for today. A study on luck and noticing that if you want, you can choose to become the person who's born under that lucky star. Peace.